Okay, so we've been working with decorators for a little while now. The next step to take is to create decorators that actually take an argument. So everything we've done so far has been, speed test. It's always speed test. It does the same thing every time. But what if we wanted to do something like this? So I don't have the decorator written just yet, but I want ensure first arg is, and I pass in burrito, and that will enforce on fave foods that the first argument needs to be burrito in order for the code to run. Otherwise, we'll get an error or an early return that will break out of the function or something. Same thing down here. Ensure first arg is, and if I pass in the number 10, I want to make sure that add to 10, whenever it's executed, num1 is always 10. So this should work, this should not work. Let's start by implementing ensure first arg is, and there's an extra step we actually have to take to make this work. So I have a little fragment here. This isn't exactly working code, but it's more just an illustration of something. When we write this pattern at decorator and then define a function afterwards, we're really doing this, right? Func, we're reassigning func to then be the result of running decorator when we pass in func, and whatever is returned from that function is assigned to func. However, if we then want to also add an argument when we call the decorator, there's an extra step we have to take, because we now need to call something like this, decorator with args, and then we pass in the arg first, and then that should actually make the decorator function return the decorator function that we pass func in to be decorated with. So essentially we need an extra layer of function, because the argument that we're trying to pass in, or in this case, burrito, we then need to return a function that is going to ensure that first arg is burrito. But first, we have to make that function, if that makes any sense. It's kind of a multi-layer process. So let me just demo it first before we get too sidetracked. First things first, we need to define ensure first arg is. That takes a function in. And instead of calling this fn, because it's not going to be a function that we're passing in, it's a value or an arg. Arg is probably not the best idea. Let's go with val. So this represents burrito, or 10. Then inside of here, we're going to define another function. We can call it inner. It really doesn't matter. And inside of that, we're going to define our wrapper function. So there's a lot. So inner is what will actually take the function. And we can add in our @wraps fn right there. Then we have the wrapper function, and don't let me forget these colons. Let me close this. When did that open up? And wrapper should just have args and our just regular decorator function that we've seen. And in here we'll do an if statement, and we want to check first of all if there are any args, and then we'll check if args 0 is not equal to val, so burrito or something. If we just did this, if arg0 not equal to val, we'd run into an error if there were no args. So instead we'll check, do args exist? And is the first one not equal to val? If that's the case, we can start by just returning, first arg needs to be, let's make an f string, needs to be val. Otherwise, we're going to return fn star args quargs. And then we return the wrapper. And then finally, we're going to return inner. So there's an extra intermediate layer now. The whole idea is that when we pass in burrito, we are then constructing a decorator using that value. So this is the decorator that's being returned, inner right here. Inner is what actually accepts the function argument, and we just check if the argument, the first one, matches whatever val is, then blah, blah, blah. We return this little error message. Otherwise, we return the result of calling function, and so on. It does get a little bit messy, but hopefully you can step through how this is actually working. Now, let's test it out. Am I missing any colons? Everything okay here? Let's see what happens. So I'm printing the result. If we execute it, it looks good. So first of all, it worked when we called this first one. When we ensured first arg is burrito, we got this. It worked. We didn't get an error. Then when we tried it again and we passed in ice cream first, we got first arg needs to be burrito. After that, we had ensure first arg is 10, and then we called it with 10 first, and then with 1 first, and we get the successful one. And then we get the return value, first arg needs to be 10. Okay, so there's a lot here. I will upload both these files. I think this illustration here can help you understand what's happening, why we need that extra layer of a function, because there's now 2 things that are actually being passed in. It just looks like one because the decorator magic behind the scenes. In the same way that this looks like a function is not necessarily being called, but it is behind the scenes. It's just the nice syntactic sugar. All right, so now we've seen how to create a decorator that accepts an argument.